was introduced in the Congress about Trump running for senator.
Yes.
He wants the health service, the public health service, to investigate, have a formal investigation of Trump arrangements. And anybody who has a grievance against Trump, there's something better they know about him.
Well, see, and remember that one he agrees on Fauci. It was an acronym. Fauci. You know, I don't know. I wish more constituents. We'll never know how many write them, but just knock it off. Get down to some serious business. You can't pitch into it.
They ignore anything that they don't like.
He's in his third or fourth term.
Well, President Warren voted against that damn budget bill or whatever. Him and that Massey from Kentucky. Let's get serious about the deficit.
Okay, welcome to First Universalist of New Madison on this day before Memorial Day. So hopefully you'll have a nice Memorial Day weekend. The weather looks like it's going to cooperate. I don't know if are there anybody having parades, or is it just the service?
Parades.
Okay. There is a service today in New Madison. Is that out at the cemetery?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Serves at Otterbein, Fort Jefferson, and New Madison.
Okay. Otterbein and New Madison. I don't know whether, let's see. Well, let's just let it go with that. Any announcements? I don't know of anything coming up. So today's topic is inequality. It's become more and more prominent in the news, and with the reason that instigated this investigation was the passage of the new great and beautiful bill that the legislature just passed and passed it on to the Senate. So we'll see what happens with that. So we're going to bring up a couple points of what is there, but that's what we'll be talking about. All right, the prelude, The Lone Wild Bird. Which is particularly pertinent. I don't know if you saw the thing on PBS this week. And we've talked about this before. They did the Audubon Society did the census for this year, and there is a drastic, marked decrease in the amount of migrating birds. I didn't quite catch, either I wasn't paying attention or I missed it as to what the rationale was, but I think it's global warming, loss of habitat, and basically kind of a coming together of all the attacks we're making on the environment as time goes along. And we will talk about that today as part of our, this is Memorial Day service, but it's part of our awareness of the world around us. And all these things interconnect. So we'll go on to the chalice lighting. This is by Lisa Doge.
Right there.
Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings overflowing. A cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst. A cup of wine for celebration and dedication. The flame of truth. The fire of purification. Oil for anointing and healing. Out of chaos, fear, and horror, thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us. In these days of uncertainty, sorrow, and rage, and a light to warm our souls and guide us home. Fittingly for Memorial Day, our opening hymn is 180 in the red hymnal. In the red hymnal 180, My Country, 'Tis of Thee. That is the connection between the church and the state. In My Country, 'Tis of Thee, it ends with Amen. All right, our affirmation. This is from the diary of Anne Frank. We did this before, but it's been a couple of years ago, so I think we could stand to do it again. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet if I look up into the heavens, I think it will all come right, and that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. There seems to be cycles in life and history. We went through a time of tribulation when Anne Frank was writing this, and we seem to be going into the same time of tribulation again. All right, staying with our theme of inequality, does anybody recognize all of these gentlemen? These are our American billionaires: Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, Larry Ellison, Jeff Bezos, Jim Walton, Rob Walton, Steve Ballmer, Sergey Brin, and Larry Page. The last two I'm not too familiar with. I think you'll be familiar with all the others. These are the people who are basically directing the course of the country as we go along. So, but we're going to do a little more of a patriotic thing first for our children's story. Maybe.
Bill Gates not included in that?
Bill Gates was not in there, and I'm not sure why.
It's been a tradition from the beginning of the National Memorial Day concert to salute all the men and women from every branch of our armed services. Please welcome the Chiefs of the Military Services.
Oh no, we're not going to do this anymore, are we?
And now, Maestro Jack Everly, our orchestra and military choruses, perform the Armed Forces Medley. Whether here or watching at home, if you are able, please stand when your service is presented. The United States Coast Guard.
those who have served, those who did serve, those who gave everything for our defense of freedom. What?
Well, recognize Kenny.
Oh, yes. Kenny, did you stand up? I wasn't watching. Good for you.
I did.
And that's, if you've watched in New Madison, actually a lot of the towns are doing that too. They have little posters on the lamppost with the individuals. And I've just kind of stopped and looked at the individual ones as they go along. I don't know many people from New Madison, but I think that is a worthy salute to those who have served. And that is the point of today. What we're talking about, not only today, but every Sunday and every day we should be talking about, is the freedoms that they fought for, we want to preserve. We want to enhance and enlarge and support those freedoms that these people have fought for. And that they have, many people have enlisted in the military and never actually fought, but even serving in the military is the service. You need to have people in the back as well as in the front. It's not just the people who carry a gun, it's the people who do all the other services from beginning to end. Okay, let's see. Sharing your joys and concerns. Do we have, yes?
It's a light candle for Jill Vanneman and her daughter Tiana White, as well as their family. They're going through some very, very difficult and end-of-life challenges as we speak. So let's keep them in our thoughts and prayers.
Is Jill the one that's headed to hospice or in hospice now? Okay. And that's from El Dorado. So medical problems and looking at what life is of value is something you need to do every day or every week. Don't wait till the time crunch is on you to have to look at this. Be aware of what's going on.
Let's also light a candle for those two young people, Israelis, so tragically killed in
Washington, D.C.
Yes.
One was an Israeli, one was an American. The lady was an American citizen, Jewish descent, getting engaged next week in Jerusalem, senselessly shot down by someone protesting the Palestinian treatment, which is a righteous protest, but not in any way that continues violence, and particularly a senseless violence. And these two, from the history, if you listen to the news reports, they were working for trying to help the Palestinian people too. They were trying to say, we need to have the hostages released. This man killed two of the people who were basically on his side. That is the senselessness of senseless violence, is when you don't even pay any attention to what you're doing. You strike out blindly, and that is, striking out blindly is always a mistake. So a candle for those, and since we're talking about the Israeli Palestinian problem, we'll light a candle for the 9 children. Did you hear that on the news? A Palestinian doctor, woman doctor, and her husband were both at work in the hospital. The Israelis bombed their house and killed 9 of their 10 children.
Wow.
9 of their 10 children, from 7 months up to 11 years old. Only one child is still alive, and he was mortally wounded and was taken to the hospital, where they saved his life on the table. Whether he's going to live through is unknown. Once again, the Israelis say there was Hamas in these people's house. I'm not sure what the excuse is, but 10 children out of 11 killed of a Palestinian doctor. It's incredible. Okay, light a candle for those who we value their presence. Margaret, Cecil, Mary, Dolly. Dolly is on her world trip, so hopefully that is going well. We're still working to try and figure out how we can get other people here. Lou, haven't heard anything from Lou, so hopefully things are going well there. But those people, even though they're not here, they are still in our thoughts. Definitely every Sunday, and most of us probably think of them occasionally during the week. All right. Ukraine, no progress. The Russians, they did exchange prisoners and have further prisoner exchanges coming. But there were more, there supposedly is a ceasefire in place, but Kiev has been bombed twice with drones in the last 2 nights, 30 to 40 to 50 people killed each time, so there's no abatement in what's going on. And we talked about Israel and Palestine. They've let, I think they said 60 trucks in with supplies. Normally, before this time, there were 600 trucks every day to feed these millions of people. So 60 trucks is a mere drop in the bucket. So we'll see what happens with that. The blockade is inhuman, unconscionable, starving the kids. But we've talked about that before, so that is a constant awareness that we have.
Let's light a candle also for the, on a more positive note, the bounty of spring. And I guess we can take that for granted, but I don't recall in recent years a more green spring than we have now. And obviously we had more than our fair share, I suppose, of rainfall.
Yes.
But my gosh, the green everywhere we see, the flowers, particularly the peonies, the iris is blooming right now.
Yep.
Let's not overlook those.
And
There
the
is beauty in the world, and it's right around us.
The grass is growing at leaps and bounds. You're mowing twice a week now to try and keep up. The only negative part on that is it's been so wet the farmers can't get in the fields. You'll notice a lot of fields are planted, but there's a lot of machinery just sitting there waiting for it to dry out. You usually like to have planting started in April and done at the end of May. It's going to be tight by the end of May this time. Once you move into June, then you have to look at short season crops. You may have to change your planting order. It's going to be, there's some difficult decisions coming up, not to mention the decisions with the what's going on with the tariffs and with the trade being stopped. China has stopped buying any beans, corn, and oil seeds from the United States, which would... All right, one more candle for those thoughts and prayers, those fears and hopes that we have not voiced, maybe we aren't even aware of, but we will support in any way that we can. All right, our message. This is not yet my right pictures, so. And so we'll see if we can find it here. There we go. All right, we're going to talk about inequality in the United States. We talked about the billionaires, and we didn't even have the one missing one. So, but this increase in wealth for the last year or 2 years, $1 billion. That's $1 billion every day was added to the wealth of the billionaires that we have. Now, what is the problem that inequality causes? We'll get to that. Some progressives have called for fighting inequality by imposing a wealth tax on the ultra wealthy. A 3% tax on wealth above $1 billion would raise $50 billion. Those gains would go mostly to the rich. The top 10% of earners would receive 2/3 of the value of the legislation, while the households in the bottom 20% would lose $1,000. So with you, instead, whoever wants to be great among you must be your servant. Or we can go to Proverbs 31, 8 and 9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are debtors that supply the food banks are being cut. So inequality has been on the rise across the globe for several decades, and actually not for several decades, it's been on the rise from the time immemorial. There is a cycle where societies gain, everybody gains. When you can take primitive societies, growing husbandry for animals, and then having surplus animals, then that surplus was turned into building for religious buildings, turned into civic buildings, turned into sewer systems, turned into storage for grain, basically increased. If you take the Egyptian civilization, but as people gained power, they took that surplus and used it to their own ends. So for instance, in Egypt, they built pyramids, which cost millions and millions of slave hours, and a lot of the surplus that was gained went into whatever the rich people, the people who controlled the society, wanted. All right, among the industrial nations, the United States is by far the most top-heavy, with the greater share of national wealth and income going to the richest 1% than in any other country. The United States saw the greatest expansion of its billionaire class. And let's see, slideshow. That's what our slide is here. The richest 1.5% in the United States own almost 48% of the world's wealth. You can see on the individual, the population size, the wealth share, and on here the population share and the wealth share. It is people who have $1 billion or more own most, and there's a little tiny population, they own most of the wealth. Equivalent to roughly $214 trillion. Adults with less than $10,000 make up nearly 40% of the world's population, but hold less than 1% of the world's wealth. Wealth is defined as the value of financial assets plus real assets, which means a house or land or cattle, minus their debts. Ultra high net worth individuals, for people who own more than $30 million, they hold an astounding 6.5% of total global wealth, yet they represent only a 0.003%, a tiny fraction of the amount of people in the world. Wealth concentration is increasing in every country. It takes a significantly more wealth to rank in the top 1% in different countries. In the United States, you have to be sitting on 5.8 million to join the elite club. In China, the top 1% is actually shrinking. Does anybody know why? China has got a real problem with real estate. They invested wildly in building new condominiums and new apartments. And the people, the Chinese billionaires, borrowed money from the Chinese banks, and now there are not enough people to buy their apartments. So there is a real estate collapse going on in China. So China is the one country that has fewer billionaires and fewer millionaires than they did in the past. How long that will last, we will have to see. The world's 26 richest billionaires owned an astonishing $2.87 trillion in wealth in 2023. That combined wealth is greater than the total output for most nations in the world. The billionaires, the richest billionaires, 26 billionaires, have more money than about 60% of the countries in the world. Someone who has $1 million in investment between 2012 and 2022, their Millionaires Club grew by 81% compared to just an 11% growth rate for the total population. The vast majority of millionaires hold less than $5 million in assets, but those in the top tier, $30 million, have expanded their ranks the quickest. The poorest 50% of the world population is responsible for just 12% of carbon emissions, but is exposed to 75% of the income loss of climate change. When the weather changes and agriculture falls or production falls, the poorest people are the ones who suffer. By contrast, the world's richest 10% account for close to half of all the emissions. The richest 10% account for half of all the carbon emissions, and that faces just 3% of the relative income losses. The more wealth you have, the more power you have, the more power you have, the more wealth you have. That is what we are looking at in the United States today. If you noticed on the inauguration, the dais, when the president took his inauguration, when he took his oath of office, was lined with his 10 people that I showed you. Those 10 people were all in the line contributing to getting him elected. And then they are in turn given beneficial treatment by the government so they can make even more money. The economy for the 1%, and this is how privilege and power drive extreme equality. In 2015, the United Nations tried to set up a sustainable development goal, basically a noble gesture, but as many gestures, it didn't really work out. It was more of a gesture than an actual program. The strong, positive, progressive actions by governments in 3 spheres can narrow the gap in inequality. The first significant is the first sphere, the first spending area is social spending on education, health, and other public services. Spending on health, education, and public services raises the general level of accomplishment and success in the population. What are we doing with our current legislative proposals? We are cutting spending on education, we're cutting spending on social programs, we're cutting spending on food programs. To fund these services and to keep power away, or keep power from concentrating, nations have to be serious about reducing inequality. So the one way to be serious about reducing inequality is tax the rich and the corporations. The corporations are now down to a 13% tax rate from what had been in the past 24%. So corporations are paying less and less money. The rich have been given a giant tax cut, and then it's just been renewed, or it will be renewed with the new legislation coming out. So they are actually paying less than their fair share. 2 years ago, when they tried to reduce the income gap between nations, they tried to figure out how to measure that gap. How do you tell what is income and what is not income? Amazingly and discouragingly, the way they measure the gap is in dead children. They measure the income gap in dead children. Nigeria ranks dead last on the commitment to reducing inequality. It has the same per capita income, annual income as Bolivia. Nigeria and Bolivia have the same annual income. 10% of Nigerian children die before the age of 5. 10% of Nigerian children die before the age of 5. The death rate in Bolivia is only 4%. They both have the same amount of annual income per person, but more than twice as many kids in Nigeria die. Why? Because of the level of social spending, the level of attention that the state pays toward the health of children. Food, vaccines, health, supporting the parents, making sure that they have a decent place to live and a decent amount of food to eat. It's hard to quantify on an individual basis, but the total numbers will show you what the answer is. The annual tax rate on U.S. corporate income runs at just 14%, well before it used to be 35%, is what I have here. U.S. workers need $10.60 an hour to keep a family of 4 above the poverty line. The minimum wage is still $7.25. The minimum wage is still $7.25. And labor rates in the United States remain minimal by any developed world standards. Trade union representation in the United States has dropped to down under just 10% since 1983. Realities like these explain why the United States ranks 21st among developed nations in commitment to reducing inequality. The United States is behind Sweden, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Germany, Austria, Finland, France, Netherlands, Luxembourg, Japan, Iceland, Ireland, Australia, Canada, Italy, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Portugal, and even Slovenia. Next, more results of rich over the poor. This was one of the more, I think I had and I must have lost it somewhere. I had a picture of Zuckerberg. How many of you know about Zuckerberg's bunker in Hawaii? Mark Zuckerberg is building a $100 million survival bunker in Hawaii, buried underground, thick concrete doors that make it blast-proof, filtered air, water, and food for years to come. What does this tell? And he's not the only one. Peter Thiel is another conservative billionaire that spends money from the conservative government, has been a vocal advocate of sanctuaries for the rich. He is talking about New Zealand building an actual hillside bunker compound that features an accommodation pod for himself and a guest lodge for 24 of his best safety-seeking friends. What this amounts to is these people do not worry about destroying the pollution, do not worry about destroying the atmosphere, do not worry about destroying the civilization of the earth, because they have a place to retreat to. The one person who does not have a bunker is Elon Musk. And why does he not have a bunker? He plans on escaping the earth entirely. If you listen to Elon Musk, he wants to go to Mars. He wants to escape Earth and go to Mars. These people are literally crazy. They are willing to sacrifice the lives of all the people on the earth, thinking that their little lifespan will be fine in their little bunker. Can you imagine the understanding of that? Instead of saying, think about this. Remember, we've talked before about the Gilded Age in the 1800s and early 1900s. There was robber barons who basically created monopolies, Carnegie and steel and Rockefeller and oil. They made millions and millions and millions of dollars. They became the wealthiest people on the planet at that time. The difference is, what did they do with all their money? Rockefeller set up the Rockefeller Center. He set up all kinds of charities. Carnegie built libraries all over the United States, literally all over the United States. 2 of the 3 towns I've lived in have a Carnegie library. Greenville has a Carnegie library. Beautiful buildings and well-funded and maintained. These people had some kind of loyalty to the civilization that provided them with the means to become rich. The difference with the rich people that we have now is they have no concern whatsoever. Bill Gates is spending some money for health, but who in the Gates family is spending the money? His wife, when he divorced her, she has spent billions of dollars.
Melinda Gates.
What's that?
Melinda Gates.
Melinda Gates has spent millions of dollars of what she inherited, or what she basically not inherited, what she gathered from her divorce settlement. And the same thing happens in more and more cases.
And
the wives,
as well.
yes, the wives of people have some kind of a conscience and are spending the money trying to help other people. The billionaires now are spending nothing to help other people. Their only goal is to spend money to get themselves or their friends elected so they can get even more money. It is a sick, sick situation, I think. Basically, the quote I saw was, they want to destroy the earth and live like gods amid the ruins. So, and this is not, I don't think this is unusual. If you look at the cycle of civilizations, if you look at the downfall of Rome, what caused the downfall of Rome was the ruling class, the senators, the people who had money, quit having loyalty toward the company else, pay off the poor people with Roman circuses and bread, so they could keep the control of the finances. And they basically bled the country dry by staying rich personally, but not supporting the country. We've talked about that before. All right, some examples of the dissolution that we're heading to. They have something called covered coachways, which I wasn't aware of. Now in large cities like New York, they are building actual covered garages where the limousines will pull inside the garage and the rich and wealthy can get into their private cars without having to be harassed by the poor people on the street. Prior to this time, you pulled up to your mansion on Park Avenue or your big hotel or your Trump Tower, and you had to actually go out into the street to get into your limousine. That is considered too dangerous now. So now they are building like 3 and 4 car sized garages just for the limousine to pull into, close the doors, load everybody up, and then leave. Pretty amazing. I told you about the Zuckerberg's bunker in Hawaii. Some other things that I've run across. The latest news has any kind of medical problem. Normally a nursing home will send someone to the emergency room if there's any kind of medical question. They're being paid a bonus to keep that person at the nursing home because that saves money for United Healthcare. We don't know, we don't have the figures, facts and figures, how many people suffer medically, but you can use your imagination. If an elderly person falls or has pneumonia or anything else and doesn't get hospital type care and just gets the supportive care at the nursing home, I can assure you the outcome will not be as good. And that is kind of what we are paying for, what United Healthcare is paying for, and that's what their profits come out of. Another contribution from the legislature in this new bill, the new tax bill, if one parent does not have a Social Security number, none of their kids will get Medicaid, will get medical care, will get medical insurance. That means if there is a foreign student or a foreign person here who is married to an American, and the kids are born citizens, and one parent is American and native, has a Social Security number, but the other parent does not, these kids will not qualify for Medicaid. They will not qualify for health insurance, for government health insurance. On the same line, they have changed the majority age on certain situations to 11 years old. As you understand, the majority age used to be 18, so you were covered on your parents' insurance and you're covered on Medicaid until you were 18 years old. They have changed it to 11. So once you're 12 years old, you no longer get free medical coverage. This is in the preliminary bill. We don't know whether it's going to go through the Senate or not. We'll have to find out. But even the fact that they're proposing this is lunacy. It is crazy. Another current atrocity. Well, I told you about the Israeli, the 9 of the 10 or the 10 of the 11 kids being killed. And of course, I can't go by without talking about how many people saw the South African interview with Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, in the Oval Office with President. And he said, "I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you." When they were talking about being attacked by the president about the treatment of whites, Afrikaners, he said, "I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you." Most of us recognize that as sarcasm. What was the president's response? "I'm sorry you don't have one too. I could use another plane." That's what he said. "I wish you did. I would take it. If your country offered the United States Air Force a plane, I would take it." And the plane that is being offered from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, is going to the Air Force. It's not going to Trump, but when they're done with the plane, the plane goes to the Trump Library. The Trump Library has no use for a plane, so I'm sure the only person using the plane will be ex-President Trump. So the real danger is not just in the U.S., it's all around the world. Democracies are losing out to polarization, hate, and indifference. Fear isolates and divides people into their tribes, caring less for others, blaming others, and even taking pleasure from the suffering of others. This is what is amazing to me. These people actually take pleasure in watching the suffering of others. Backsliding leaders play on inequality and deepening polarization by encouraging a sense of grievance among the public, feelings of being left behind and alienation. Backsliding leaders prey upon all of these. They do so by finding different targets to blame for the inequality. Left wings it's their fault. Populists are their fault. Right-wing ethno-nationalist backsliders might nurture grievances by blaming outsiders or immigrants. Increased incivility increases immigration away from crime, creates immigration pressures, which fosters fear and hate. It's a never-ending cycle of going down and down and down. The worse the situation gets in the world, the more people flee these poverty-stricken countries where they were under control of gangs. Where do they go? They go to the rich countries. They go to Europe or they go to the United States. What happens when they come to the United States? People feel threatened. They use the fear impulse and tell them how dangerous it is to have people coming here, and how instead of supporting them and helping them, we need to push them back and lock them out. And then that creates more inequality in the home country, which means more people trying to flee the home country. It's a never-ending cycle, and I do not have the answer for that. Basically, international criminals benefit, and it decreases the cooperation between countries, and it decreases the support for democracy. Democracy is when everybody tries to help everybody else. That is not what we have going on now. And that seems to be gaining in force. All right, comments or questions?
All of those billionaires, there are a couple of them in that I would consider personally as philanthropic. They still have the concerns of greater society. Warren Buffett just stepped down from Berkshire Hathaway. He gave literally millions, probably billions, to the Gates Foundation simply because he didn't want to duplicate a foundation and its expenses. So he just forked it over. He has lots more waiting, but there are those people that are still there. And despite the attack of the current administration on public broadcasting system and its associated organizations, if you look at the foundations at the end or at the beginning of various programs on PBS, they're still out there. And even though some of those foundations are using it as a tax break perhaps, the greater good comes from their sharing the wealth. So we do have a number of people, perhaps not in the area of Bezos or Musk, but we do have those out there that are still philanthropic and have the greater good, at least of mankind, humankind out there. So I just wanted to point that out, that there are some, quote, some good ones still there.
We have to hold Warren Buffett up as a real example. He advocates that millionaires and billionaires should pay more taxes. He actually says that. He said, and this has been years ago, I pay less taxes than my secretary. And Warren Buffett is not an idiot. I mean, whatever the law allows, and he has smart accountants and smart tax people, so he does what the law allows. That is our problem, is these people put their people into Congress and they create laws that benefit them. This is what we had at the Gilded Age, and Teddy Roosevelt came in and said, we need to change this, and they put in laws that raised the income tax on rich people. If you remember, in the late 50s and early 60s, there was a 90% tax on millionaires. In other words, if you made over $250,000, 90% of that, and of course, they had accountants, they hid their money as well as anybody else, but at least that was the basic tax. Now, they say we're going to keep lowering the tax and lowering the tax on millionaires because supposedly it's the rising tide lifts all boats. I forget what the term is for the spreading the wealth, but that has been proven not to be true. Rich people don't spend their money for poor people. They go to Asia and buy a $100 million yacht. There's no people in America making any money off of that, and that money is not being spread out. The only money they spread around is tips when they go to a restaurant and give the server a little bit of extra money. They do not spend their money in the United States. They're not investing it. They're not building factories. They're not doing any of the things that would help the United States. That rule has been disproven over and over again, and yet that is the rationale that rich people use. And basically it's pure and simple greed. I want more for myself. There is no loyalty to the nation, to the patriotism of the United States anymore. Okay, offering. If we have anything to share, please put it in the case. And we are going to hear the Navy hymn, correct?
Yeah.
Does anybody know who that was that came in?
I don't know.
Kenny was talking to some guy that came in.
A Well, he went to the service at Otterbein, Kenny did.
Yeah, maybe that guy, maybe he went with him then. Closing hymn is 174, and that's also in the red hymnal. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies.
Number 174. Yep. No, the red one.
Oh, the red hymn.
Because I'm not sure why, for Unitarians, all the patriotic songs got left out of the new one. And we are still as patriotic as anybody else. In fact, maybe more so than anybody else. So.
Yeah.
We're relying on the beacon.
Yes, exactly. you notice in the second verse, these people were thinking ahead, and they were realistic people. The second verse is, God mend thy every flaw. They knew that America was not created perfect, but was had the ability and the necessity to become better as it went along, not worse. All right, Extinguishing the Chalice. This is by Maureen Killeran. As we listen to the blessing of music, may we know this ending as more than a time of goodbye. May the warmth of this community and the memory of our chalice flame sustain our hearts and encourage our minds as we engage the blessings of life's challenges and joys. The service has ended. Your service has begun. Go in peace. Go in joy. Go in love. And our postlude is God Bless America. All right, thus endeth the most patriotic day we've had so far this year. And probably the last until we get to July 4th, which we'll do all those songs again July 4th. I found this is Zuckerberg's thing in Hawaii. Pretty incredible. $100 million spent on this little hideaway to preserve. Think about this. If the world goes to hell in a handbasket, Zuckerberg and his family, friends, whatever, will be in this little place for what, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years? If the world has collapsed, it's not going to come back. They're going to live the rest of their lives there and then die there. The kids are going to die there. I mean, what are they thinking?
It's going to take a while to get there also, just as it will for Theo going to New Zealand. You have to consider, even if you have a private plane, it's going to take a while. And if there are certain atmospheric conditions prevailing, it's going to take a long time to get to New Zealand. So you might want to reconsider that investment.
It just boggles the mind that instead of trying to preserve the environment as they live in, they want to create a place where they can escape to, and they don't care about what, and they're actually demolishing the environment as they go along. These rules that are being put in, it's just...
But it always helps to have discretionary cash.
The government now is trying to stop California from having the strict pollution laws. They're trying to roll back. Not only are they not going ahead with pollution control. They're going backwards. They're trying to stop anybody else from doing anything. So anyway, what I wanted to show you at the end, we talked about before. Anybody know where this is? These are the horses, the Quezon horses from Arlington. If you remember a couple years ago, because so many of them had died and they were having so much trouble with them. And anybody, I didn't think about it at the time, but the reason's pretty obvious. Does anybody know why they were having all this trouble at Arlington?
A rather heavy load to pull.
They had a heavy load to pull. The Quezon weighed a ton, which the new one weighs 1,000 pounds. The biggest trouble was from the time of the World War I, the people that took care of the horses grew up on farms and knew about horses. Since 1950s and 60s, the people who are appointed to the Quezon detail know nothing, literally nothing about horses. So the horses were mistreated, not intentionally, because they just didn't know any better. So now they've started up again, and they have new laws governing the horses. Now, before they used to buy 10 horses, all the same age, keep them all, and then when they aged out and retired, they bought 10 more horses. Not too smart. Does anybody know anything about training horses? You put a young horse with an old horse that knows what it's doing. So now they stagger the ages of the horses. The new horse, the 3-year-old, is put with a 10-year-old horse. That way the young horse learns how to do the job without any kind of friction or any problems. They have taken the people who are assigned to this detail and they go through a horse boot camp. They take them to a riding stable and they show them how to clean stalls, how to brush, how to bridle, how to walk up to a horse, how to act with a horse. Basically, it's a whole new training situation. The person in charge of the Quezon detail is an Army officer and a veterinarian. He's a veterinarian, so he knows what's going on with horses. So, and they also have limited the service. Now, each team only does 2 funerals a day, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, and they only do 10 a week. So they do 2 a day for 5 days a week. They didn't say what they were doing before, but obviously it was a lot more than that, and that's what they were wearing out. They've got new saddles. The old saddles used to be from World War I, had wooden frames on them. If they weren't fit to the horse exactly, it caused all kinds of bruises. And I showed you the one time where the woman touched the horse and it collapsed to the ground. You pinched nerves and caused nerve damage. All that has hopefully been rectified, so the Quezons are back on duty at Arlington. So that ends our service for the day. Our candle is still lit for those who are absent from our presence, but not from our hearts.
Memorial Day, he was up and went to Otterbein. He goes every year when he's church early because Otterbein Church is closed, of course, but they still have a service out there, Memorial Day service at the cemetery calling the church. So he goes out there because I think a good number of his family are buried, I think, and Otterbein Church is just, it's privately owned now. I don't know who owns it. There seems to be any activity around it, but there was a new deck built in the back of it. But in front of it, it looks like it almost boarded it up, and yet there's a deck on the back built. Otterbein Church. Where is it? It's just over here. Yeah. About a mile and a half of there. Yeah.
Does anybody know, is there kind of a tabulation or register of graves in those graveyards out here?
Great question, because I thought I would drive it in because we got an inquiry. And so I got it in my maiden here. It was just a letter of somebody wanting maiden name off the stone. I'm going to take it to the museum because the genealogical center's up there. And they got 2 rooms, files, and volunteers who work there that have every information at every fingertip.
Well, there is a thing going on in the country now, trying to find Revolutionary War graves in Ohio that people are doing a study, and I thought, well, what the heck,
Sure, there are some.
Well, there is one, there's a brand new monument,
Yeah, or
5 years old, out here.
So there are some markers from the revolution.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Like
I
convention
think
centers,
I-
they'd be veterans from the Revolutionary War, not necessarily.
Yeah, I remember there used to be some of those flag standards that had 1776 on them out there, but they
Yeah.
probably.
And Civil War.
They were asking for volunteers, to record those
Yeah.
and then send them to the central location, so I may go out there and see if I can find them.
With the Dark County area, Greenville, DAR has been very active in that.
And
And in fact, they have, I think, both new Revolutionary War monuments in every large cemetery in Dark County, larger. They don't have one in Greenville, they got one here.
Yeah.
Because of the burial.
Yeah.
And
I was going to look at, Wayne Lakes has a little tiny cemetery just across from the gatehouse.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
On private, so I
See that.
The house.
Okay.
I think everyone's in one, there's only like 7 or 8 gravestones there.
You know, I've often wondered about that hill on Route 36 before you get to Covington. There's one there, farmhouse up on the hill there. There's a little cemetery
There is.
out close to the road there. And I often wondered if that's just a family plot or something, maybe. I don't know.
Be interesting to see, that's another giant change, because with, everybody getting cremated now.
Yeah.
There's not the burial plots anymore, so,
Yeah.
how do you do your genealogical study?
Well, and I don't know if there's any consistency among cemeteries on policies that burying ashes. They seem to be all over the place. Unless I can stand corrected on that, but some cemeteries will let you bury them on top of one another or on the same plot.
Right.
Others won't, they require different ones.
Right.
So I'm not sure how that works. It'll be interesting. It'll be a really difficult thing for future genealogists.
Yeah, that's what, because, you think about the people that keep their ashes on the mantelpiece.
Or in the closet.
Or spread them in the woods or on the ocean.
Yeah,
And there's no permanent marker, there's got to be a recording in the government, the county record, death record.
And spreading ashes is different from state to state and country to country. Because I know other lady who wanted to be buried back in Austria, her ashes scattered there. Well, the family probably did it illegally flying over there because the red tape trying to get that back in Austria was impossible. It's interesting how that all works. But there are lots of cemeteries, and it's amazing how many of them are still maintained. The one on the Madison Universalist, I always forget to know that one. And there are a good number.
I think some townships do a better job than others. I think Harrison Township does a real good job.
Yeah, they do.
Greenville Township, I don't know about them. My grandmother buried up at Coal Town. The cemetery, Naval Cemetery near Coal Town, and it's, sometimes you go up there and it's like that's been mowed for a month,
Well, I know Greenville was having that trouble last year, right over here. Because aren't these two maintained by two separate entities?
I think so.
Greenville is an independent board.
Yeah, this is
Usually cemeteries, townships responsibility. And anyway, Greenville is having some difficulties. Last year, I don't know how it happened. It turned around. I think maybe enough complaints. Yeah. It's too bad. Because these cemeteries, they collect money in burial fees. And I looked it up one time how much they get. It actually exceeds what they're getting in taxation. Because some townships tax just for the cemeteries. And even that is not equal. I think they got six grand maybe. I looked at the county auditor's office one time, maybe $6 grand a year. But they get their revenue on burial fees.
Right.
But then those who serve on the board take certain fees and forget to pay, the auditors told them over and over that they have to pay in retirement, they don't, they still don't do us today. Well, then when you take all the money left over, you just take out enough to pay John, Harry, and Pete. They go out there and get on a loan and do the job. And then they sort of said they want to, but they didn't, and then people start complaining, and aren't you glad you asked for my assessment? What I like to see, but I don't have the initiative to do it.
Yeah, I'll see you next Sunday.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for that. on Tuesday, and I'm gonna be there this week. I had to miss last week because of cats.
And once you say,
I said, thanks for playing, I really enjoy your music.
oh, well, Lloyd and I keep at it, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, we are the most fortunate for it.
Yes.
I don't think any churches have two people like that.
No,
Probably not.
I don't think so.
They don't.
Have a good day.
See
I'll
ya.
see you next week.
All right.
I don't know what all Ray's doing. Is Robert Ball, have you heard?
He hasn't been any good. I don't know. He hasn't been any good at all. Let's go. This is what I heard. Yeah.
So, I don't know.
Huh.
Well, I didn't know that about Jill anyway, that she's,
Well, that,
in the hospital.
I don't think they were releasing a lot, but Derek sent us periodically, and I knew she was in Greenbrier, Greenbrier, I think, maybe Greenbrier. Anyway, but it was from pneumonia that she had.
Okay.
But then somehow, and I figured it was from her MS or Parkinson's, whatever she has. But the one on, anyway, the whole thing that precipitated is dialysis. And so Derek said in his last note to us that the family, she had decided that she no longer wanted dialysis. Isn't that usually 48 hours?
Tuesday week. Well, it's hard to tell, it depends on how debilitated somebody is.
Well, I had a doctor friend in Dayton who gave it up. He was going in 2 days.
Yeah, that's pretty severe. I mean, most people can go longer than that.
But anyway, she expressed her wish, Jill did, according to Derek's message to us, that she wanted that, and she wanted to be passed away at Bancrest or Greenbrier or whatever. She didn't want in the hospital anymore. So that's where they were, and Derek basically said any day now.
Yeah, we said in a week.
Yes, a week. So I just feel for them.
Yeah.
It's just,
They're very close. I know Tiana and her mother, they were basically the lifeblood of the church.
you just have to be careful at the hospital, because family will ask you how long, and you just have to give them a range, because if you say, oh, they've got at least a week, then they die the next day. Or if you say, oh, they're wobbling and their blood pressure's going down, and it'll be within hours, and then they hang on for like 3 or 4 days. So you get criticized for all that stuff, so you gotta be really careful.
I bet.
because it's-
You can't.
You can't forecast.
There's a limit to technology.
Yes.
I can remember my dad was on dialysis about 2.5 years after me before he passed away. And he took over here, he looked at it as a social outing. But anyway, went to Richmond's dialysis center, and there were 2 nephrologists there. One of them walked, in my opinion, walked the bar, just laid back, extremely knowledgeable patient at the center. His name was Mustafa. His colleague, Elasso, they were both Pakistani, was just the opposite. So I remember one case conference early on. No, it was actually, Dad was in about a year. Anyway, we were going on about, my dad was a vegetarian, so of course that really taxed their nutritionists as to how they were going to control that. But anyway, I remember, he just stops everything when my sister and I are expressing concerns about certain lab data or whatever. Well, he's only got another year. He went in when he was at X number of years, and that's 2.5. My dad asked me exactly what that shortly said.
Yeah, that's.
Exactly. I mean, almost exactly. Died in November of 2005. And he just said, matter of factly, as if I could be compassionate, unlike Dr. Mustafa, bless his heart. But they did a good job at Richmond. Greenville's Dialysis Center, at least when it first started out, we couldn't wait. We were tired of making that trip.
Right.
They were lousy. They contracted with the nephrologist from Miami Valley Hospital. They would not, anyway. You know, dialysis patients periodically, even though whatever you do, they stay to the hospital for a couple of days because everything. Well, he would do that. Well, they didn't have a dialysis center in Wayne, he'd have to go to Richmond. Well, anyway, it was a real hassle. And so anyway, we got him out. We were so excited, we got him into dialysis in Greenville about a year before he died. And he lasted 6 weeks. And because they didn't have dialysis in Wayne, he would have to, his
fax them all the lab data and everything to the dialysis center after you've had 3 days and 3. They're not doing that. So, usually you have to fax it. And believe it or not, Medicare paper can be transported. In those days, it was touch and go. From the brother home to Richmond, 3 days a week. They paid for that for the better part of a year. I don't know about your experience with dialysis, but I'll get off the topic. On the one hand, it extends your life. On the flip side, it just totally corrupts homeostasis in your body. And it's constantly either you're bleeding or you're struggling for breath because you're filled up from fluid because of chemical imbalances.
And that's, a lot of it depends on the person, because you have to watch your fluid intake, you have to watch your protein intake, and if you can monitor that on your own, you can put off.
They complimented us, but it seemed like every 3 or 4 months, emergency squad was coming because he was overloaded with fluid. But eventually we got so we could tell when it was going to happen. That
the newer one, I don't know, maybe they didn't have it when you were there, is they do dialysis every night at home. You plug yourself in. And that's better, because instead of going every 3 days, which means the toxins are building up in 3 days.
that's,
And you feel really good.
never thought of that. But that's the thing, particularly for young people who stand a chance of getting a kidney transplant. They're able to do that. We had our hands full working with my mother and just managing everything. And it worked. They said he did fine all the way up to the end practically. But it's extended his life 2.5 years like that. I thought they told us.
The only thing that makes me nervous when the doctor says you have a year and you have exactly a year is when they put their thumb on the scale. It's just like the nurses. You read about that, somebody's suffering and they shouldn't have to suffer, so I'll just help them along a little bit. And they give them an air or a big shot of insulin or something, and they get away with it. You read all the time in the news, someday they noticed that 12 patients have died from this one nurse over the last couple of years.
One only compassionate nurse.
Yes, the nurse who really cares for her patients and cares for the family, and all of a sudden, all the deaths are occurring on her shift. Prevention in the hospital should be paying more attention when there's a death. Everybody needs to be under suspicion and watching them, because all these people are the most innocent people in the world.
They have infection control specialists, they don't have death control specialists.
Well, it's like
With a degree in
the
stats.
insurance companies, they're literally killing people. If you're taking somebody who has fallen or has a medical emergency and you're not sending them to the emergency room, and you're expecting
And a profit incentive company from complying with that? Yeah, we'll comply with that.
Yeah.
Give us a bonus.
exactly, and the nursing homes, their incentive to keep them there.
It's really Medicare is going to be monitoring that one because
The trouble
they
is,
monitor urinary infection now because they use that as a marker for how well nursing homes are caring for a patient. They have to
they're cutting all their oversight staff. All the people, and it's up and down the line on everything else, OSHA, all these people are being laid off and fired. The people that watch for the bird flu infection, those people have all been fired. We're looking, things are gonna get bad here in a month or two. Food inspectors, the government inspectors inspect your food to see if it's been slaughtered.
You wait.
They're firing those
You wait
guys.
for the salmonella operation.
That's what's gonna happen. But people don't seem to care. There's
They don't know about it.
700 measles cases in Texas, and everybody knows because dumbass said don't get a measles vaccination. And there's over 1,200 cases in the United States, and they said 90% of them are people who have not been vaccinated, or they don't know their vaccination status, which means they probably haven't been. But the thing is, just because those people are dying, they're making people, innocent people, who can't get vaccinated because of an immune disease or deficiency or, an autistic kid or whatever. Those kids are getting sick too, and there's no reason for them to do that. It's just.
Well, and that all started during COVID. We're now more ready for the next pandemic. And we should have learned our lesson on this one, but because of politics and because at some point during that process, medical care
can't close anything, or you can't tell us what to do. You can't tell me that I have to wear a mask. No, you don't. Celebrate your freedom to infect other people. That's your freedom.
Kennedy says kids are better off getting the measles because it goes up their immune
Oh,
system.
natural immunity.
Yeah.
Everything's natural. Yeah.
It's just,
It's so natural that I'll take ivermectin because somebody said that keep me from getting COVID.
yeah.
Okay. Or worms. And I don't want either one of them. So, and they're still out there.
Yes.
My sister tells me the other day, somebody, a friend of hers was talking about taking ivermectin because their daughter got cancer.
It's just, to me, if there's some kind of mass insanity going on, it's like some kind of cyclical thing.
But if you're a conspiracy theorist and you have nightmares at night, wondering what the next conspiracy is that's about to get you, why did you listen to somebody said you can take a horse dewormer and that'll help you? If you're a conspiracy theorist, you don't trust this person, that person, this government, this agency, FEMA, God forbid, Fauci, God forbid, and suddenly you go, oh, well, is that right? Okay, yeah, I'll take ivermectin. It doesn't make any sense.
To me, that's the viral nature of it. In the 50s and 60s, we all admired and listened to experts. If somebody had training and expertise in something, then we all listened to them, and that's how we got roads built and spaceships and everything else. Now, with this viral thing is turned around where nobody, if you're an expert, they make fun of you.
You're a suspect.
Yeah,
You're a suspect.
you're part of the deep state or something, and the only people they trust are people with no education whatsoever who come up with all this harebrained stuff that even common sense says it doesn't make any sense, and yet that's what they would rather believe in, which to me is some kind of infection of the mind that weakens people's processing ability. It's just like, they're trying to eliminate any kind of critical thinking in schools, and it's like, it's the same process. Why?
Basic skills.
Why would you, as a legislator, try to get that school system to make people dumber? I mean, just because you're dumb, well, then maybe you're.
But it's my right to homeschool.
Well, that's what I mean.
I got an integrated education. It's my right.
That's what I mean. That's the virus speaking.
Yeah.
When they say, "I'm dumb and I want you to be dumb."
Parents are the ultimate
and we all
educators
know.
of their children. We
Yeah.
know that. And
Yeah.
ask Newman. He's going to tell us that if we go to that thing on Friday. I hope it's still on because I want to meet this Derby Baptist minister.
Where's that?
You told us about it. Wasn't it in our camp on Friday, the 30th?
I just went to the RID in Fort St. Clair in Eaton yesterday. Was that yesterday? That's Friday. There was quite a few people there, and it was all the same thing. People saying, the country's going crazy, and what we're going to do about it. So we're having a big demonstration in Eaton on Flag Day, not Flag Day, but Trump's birthday, which is the
In Eaton, they are.
Eaton, they're doing it like noon to 1, and Eaton has every year on that day anyway, has a standard village pride thing.
Oh, this will be a
But
big confrontation.
No, because the pride thing is from 4 to 6.
Okay.
So they're doing the demonstration from 12 to 1 because they don't want to interfere with Eaton's thing, and they don't want people to think they're protesting Eaton's Pride Day. They want to protest. And it's like I was up in Greenville yesterday, and there was like 4 people standing around the square with signs. So I stopped and talked to them, and they said they're there every Saturday. So I'm going to try.
Are they representing any particular group?
Basically, they're Democrats, but they don't say Democrats. They just say, this is the things that the country is doing that's taking us down the wrong path. So we need to set course and change our direction. And we're basically just trying to raise awareness of what's going on.
Well, you had the patriotic celebration, with the heads of each of the branches of service. When you put that out there, I thought you were going to go with the fact that, did you see any of these people here because they're longer?
They've
been fired. They've all been fired.
Black guys are going.
Because he was black.
Yes. welcoming the Afrikaners from South Africa because they're being slaughtered and genocide, and that's all, none of that is true.
See,
And it's just,
what Trump should have said when he thought that, you said I don't want to give you, Trump should have responded back. That's to be expected from a shithole country.
except I don't think he wants to call the white Afrikaners country who started the country.
Well, what they should know what that's all about. That's just backlash.
Well, that's
from the whites.
Yeah.
And that's why they're peppering, and they see that they've got it in here because of our political quote persuasion. That's what that's all about.
That's an inside job of Musk. Musk grew up during apartheid. His family and his parents made money with the separation of the races.
Sure.
That's his inner belief and that he's got in trouble with his all of his companies and factories for mistreating minorities. It's built into his system. It's just, and all these people, they know this, and yet they accept it and support it. And that's what kind of boggles the mind, is this kind of race to the bottom where they take pride and they take joy in discriminating. When they say we're going to lower the age of a majority to 11 or 18, so these kids can't get health care, they're kicking millions of people off of Medicare. What do they think is going to happen with them?
Just having to work.
Well, that's what
They'll be labor supply.
and that's partly what they're talking about is that people are forced to work, so they have to work at McDonald's or wherever. But there's a lot of people that aren't going to be able to work, and what are they going to do for Medicare? Are the hospitals going to see it for free? Because part of the medical thing is going to wipe out Medicaid in rural hospitals. That's where they get their money. So rural hospitals are going to start closing, so there won't be a hospital.
And they're already closing.
They're already closed because of Medicaid problems.
It'll be interesting to see when Trump leaves office, first of all, obviously lots of gifts there, but, who's going to write the books on the damage it caused to this country?
Yes.
And particularly any damages that are far-reaching damages that we can't control, even though we have a change of administration because of the damage done. That's going to be ripe for research and publication.
And I think the researchers are still going to do it whether they're funded or not.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like trying to put Harvard out of business. I mean,
And that's downright vindictive.
Yeah,
It's nothing but
to
vindictive.
say that foreign students can't enroll in Harvard because we don't like Harvard,
Yeah.
and then, like 20% of their population is foreign.
So they don't stay here and add to our expertise in our workforce.
Yes.
Instead, they go to college in China
And
and become residents of
Europe has put up a big bounty,
I see
$1
that.
billion or something, to recruit American scientists.
Yeah, the European Union, you can tell they're seeing big hats with them. And I think, in fact, they're gonna play hardball with him.
Well, they need to.
Because they see him escaping from the 90 days and the indefinite moratorium with China. They see him getting out of all that. You watch, they're gonna hold his feet to the fire.
For him to make money on every little thing goes into his pocket. And then
And we still control.
his spokesperson said that he has a blind trust. And his trust isn't blind. He's never
It's smart.
He's never put anything out. His kids are running it, and he knows exactly what his kids are getting. And now he's talking about running for president on the next time.
Who is?
Don Jr.
Well, yeah. Way to see those slick.
Oh, yeah.
He is one slick, really. Dude.
Just can't believe the stuff that's going on.
He looks a lot like, what's that terrorist? So you can see the pictures of.
You know who he looks like? I've seen a couple of joke things on the internet. He looks like Trudeau.
He did.
Pierre Trudeau. Remember when Justin Trudeau, when when Trudeau was here, she went right up to him and talked to him and everything else, and then everybody started a whispery campaign that they had something going on. And now they're showing pictures of Don and Trudeau, like silhouette pictures. They do facial expressions and everything else. A lot of likes, and now the insinuation is that he's actually the father of Melania's baby.
Ah.
So, yeah, the reason that Trump is mad at Harvard and Stanford and all where it was rejected.
Was it, you think?
Well, I don't know, I've got to do a little research on it.
I wouldn't doubt it.
I wouldn't doubt it either.
They just don't have anything against Sylvanians.
Well, the whole thing is just, I
Well,
mean.
who is Donald Jr.'s mother? Is that by Vaughn?
All three of those kids are on it, so children. And Tiffany is what's her face?
The other, the American, the one that
Was that before or no?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Tiffany was after Ivana. Who was he married to?
Was it after Ivana? Was the first lady in the White House who brought her parents over from somebody, so she was a illegal immigrant, and then brought her parents over. And then there's a whole thing that's immigrants.
Well, that's one of her first she's attempting to defend and support women whose pictures have been, and young women who have been ruined, their lives have been ruined by outed on the internet and misuse of their photos and sexual abuses. So I think that's a great cause, because Nancy Reagan's was drugs and it was law.
Just simple.
Yeah, just saying it was so stupid, Nancy's was, and I know she meant well. Pat Nixon's, I don't know what hers was, she never said anything. And then,
The Ford too, like
Betty Ford was,
drinking.
yeah, don't drink and drive, don't drink at home press conferences, don't drink and preside over these teas. That was her cause. And what was, Laura Bush, or Forrest was reading.
Yeah,
Hers was legit, and Barbara Bush's was reading.
Rosalynn Carter,
It was mental health, wasn't it? Seriously.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
See, that's quality. That's quality. Class acts. All the mother cared about was, did she look at me in that damn suit and hat, elder navy blue hat that matched her outfit?
I still can't believe she wore that coat to the visit during the last administration. Visit the border that said, I don't care to you.
I don't care to
I
you.
mean,
Well, that was.
while she was going to visit kids in cages, so.
I'm sure somebody got a card.
I doubt it. Remember that report?
And remember, Sarah Huckabee Sanders she's governor of Arkansas, and she's laying down, she's going to depublicize education, and she's got her.
Well, see how she handles the tornadoes in St. Louis, and she can't get any FEMA.
And she gets it, but I don't know, Josh Hawley is working his butt off trying to get it.
Well, that's gonna be, once it comes up, I wanna see what happens in the Senate. Because, you know, this Asian majority thing, I mean, that's just ludicrous. How can you possibly reduce the age majority to 11 years old? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And surely there's somebody's, but the thing is, Republicans in the legislature, supposedly there's 4 of them that were gonna vote against it, and they all turned coat and turned tail and voted whatever Trump put the pressure on.
But he really is concerned about, the average person, because particularly if as long as they don't make too much money. His buds are millionaires, they get a good bit of tax breaks. But if you want to get a maximum $4,000 off tax write-off on Social Security, then you have to make less than $75,000 a year. Otherwise, you're screwed. You have to pay full till. 85% it is.
Yeah.
You have to pay 85% of your Social Security earnings. Otherwise, paying up to $75,000, he's giving everybody a tax rate $4,000 right off the bat. Isn't that nice of him? But then those guys making more than $75,000, way up there in the millions, they're getting it really much better. Once again, it's called screwed middle class. They're the ones who pay the taxes.
And actually, the lower class, like I say, with the cuts on Medicaid and food stamps and all the rest of that, because there's a lot of people who work, who get food stamps and Medicaid, but they don't make enough money.
Right.
And they're being cut. That's what the analysis showed, that those people are gonna lose $1,000, $2,000 a year, whereas the millionaires are gonna get like hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in income. And they don't share the wealth, they don't spread it out.
You make up to about $150,000 as a couple. You get to collect your $80,000 to send your child from a stable house to a private school, and $6,500 if you want to send your child to an elementary school. As long as you're making under $150,000 I'll check on that. I don't know if I wrote that date down about that Jonathan Newman thing, but I thought it was on Friday, the 30th. It's Friday. And I thought it was at the Arcanum Village office. He was going to be there holding court.
What's his name? Davison's team is coming someday. They were talking about the meeting on Friday. He's gonna be at, Commissioner, he's gonna be in 4 different places. He's gonna be in 4 different places in Burke County.
Yeah.
And,
I don't know, it's gonna be one of his aides.
Yeah, one of his aides will be, one place at 9, one place at 10:30, one place at 11:30, one place at 2. I can't remember now exactly which ones it was.
I think the one around noon usually is at the commissioner's office. Here.
Well, they were all, township, either township offices. And different ones. I didn't write, actually, I brought a paper, and I didn't bring it with me here. But all you're gonna see there is the aides, you're not gonna see him. So, it's
No,
just like when you send them a letter.
Thank you very much. When we get back to Washington, we'll make sure it gets.
Yeah, the aides might read.
Yeah, thanks a lot for
Most
your
people
time.
said they've been sending letters and never really even any response.
I got one back from him. I couldn't believe it. I think because I didn't put it as an insulting way, but I basically explained to him that there are 3 branches of government, and then there's always a appeals process if you don't agree with something, and thank God we have that and everything. And he said, yeah, and he never addressed the question of calling judges rogue, but he did say that, just one individual in the judicial system should not be able to impede the progress of our president's administration. God forbid, since he's making such great progress.
Well, that's their plan, is to eliminate, the judge being able to do a blanket thing. What that means is, everybody that protests something has to file their own lawsuit. It can't be one lawsuit in one place. That applies to the whole country. And that's what they want.
Then he's full till he can do whatever.
Then he can do whatever he wants, because, maybe one lawsuit will win here in New York, and one will win in Ohio, but Kentucky and Tennessee and Alabama, if there's nobody filing a lawsuit, they'll go right ahead and deport whoever they want, no justice.
Well, you have to challenge on that, because their favorite mantra, at least in Ohio legislature, is local control. Until it's
Yeah,
something
we don't
that we
know.
want to control.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we don't know local control. We don't know that's not true.
Okay, so we got rid of Homewell. There was another reason, we got rid of the State Board of Education, in the budget bill. We got rid of a lot of other things in the budget bill because we just buried it in there. And then we forgot to have any hearings, but what about local control? Local control.
Yeah, they're all hypocrites.
You got over 30% of your operating budget in reserve, and you put it back because of the inconsistency of school funding in Ohio. You have to give it back to the taxpayers now. Is that local control? I don't think so.